awesome to hear from him for the first time and for me for the first time. Whit Gibbons is Professor Emeritus of Ecology, University of Georgia and Savannah River Ecology Lab, or SREL, some of you may have heard it called. He's written 25 books and more than 250 scientific publications on conservation and the environment, with a focus on reptiles and amphibians. Whit has had environmental commentaries on National Public Radio, written more than 1,000 popular articles published in magazines and newspapers, and continues to write a weekly environmental column for EcoViews. I'm going to post EcoViews. This should be a link. If you'll let me, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll put that in the chat. Initially distributed by the New York Times regional newspaper group for more than 40 years, he's wrote the Merit Badge booklet, Reptile and Amphibian Study for the Boy Scouts of America in 1993. So Whit is definitely one of the experts in herpetology, especially in the state of South Carolina. So we are in for a treat. What he is going to speak about today is America's longest research study on Diamondback terrapins. The longest ongoing study of Diamondback terrapins began in the coastal salt marshes and tidal creeks bordering Kiawah Island, South Carolina, almost 40 years ago. In the early 1980s, terrapins were abundant in the Kiawah marshes, but dramatic population declines were reported over the next 2 decades as coastal development and crabbing activity, both commercial and recreational, expanded. So future research plans and directions based on previous findings and the current status of Kiawah terrapin population will be discussed. So really looking forward to that. And Whit, if you would like to begin, all you. You need to unmute. Yep, there you go.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. And it's a pleasure to talk to everyone today. Okay, how do I make my screen show up here? Are you going to do that?
Nope. I think you just need to go to the bottom and hit
the share screen. Okay. Yep. Did that work?
That worked.
Okay. Well, then let's get started. We're going to talk about a great turtle, my favorite turtle of all the 300-something species in the world. Diamondback terrapins are the favorite one I've worked with and favorite one I've ever seen at all. They are absolutely beautiful, and they're very unusual turtle, which I'll get to in a moment. Started studying these turtles back in 1983, and this was on Kiawah Island. And what I say about our studies on Kiawah apply to any of the barrier islands with salt marshes and tidal creeks and backwaters, brackish backwaters. That's where these turtles live. And they're called terrapins, but they're all terrapins are turtles. And so what I'm going to be talking about is applicable to where you are along the coast. So it doesn't have to be just Kiawah Island. Started in 1983. And it is important to say there have been lots of people involved in these studies. And I can't list everybody, but here are a few of the people have been instrumental in recent times and earlier times as well. And just, you may know some of these people, and they've all had different kinds of contributions, but all of them have caught a terrapin or two. And the reason I can't list everybody is because there've been over 400 people involved in this study. I mean, who have gotten into the water, into the tidal creeks, the Kiawah River, and helped us catch terrapins. We've gotten more than 3,000 terrapins over the years. So there are a lot of people, and if I leave somebody out and you happen to be watching or know them, I apologize. I call this the longest study on Diamondback terrapins because it is the longest study on Diamondback terrapins. And it started in about 38, 39 years ago. In fact, this is where it started. Let's see, I can't make this thing. Okay, there we go. It started at Kiawah Island. And what I'm going to do is start at the beginning, go all the way through to where we are today. And sort of look at some of the highlights and the key points that and findings and just interesting aspects of it. But I want to start, this is a scientific study, and I want to say a word about how much careful planning goes into a scientific study. And a long-term, and you talk to a lot of scientists, they'll tell you how they carefully planned the study and how they planned it to go that way into the future and so forth. Well, I can tell you what that word is. For me, it's serendipity. Serendipity is just a happy, unexpected discovery by accident. In other words, there wasn't any planning. It just happened. And I really think a lot of our scientific knowledge, studies you see from other people, when they look back, they think they had a plan, but actually things sort of took their own course and worked out. And this one started when I was on Kiawah Island doing an inventory, working with the group as they were developing Kiawah Island. I didn't work with the group developing it, but I did the environmental studies of looking at surveys and inventory of the reptiles and amphibians. And I'd really never been in the salt marsh. In fact, never seen a terrapin before, because we were looking at animals on the island itself, the rattlesnakes, the black racers, the frogs, lizards. And then one day, my son, who was about 8 or 10 at the time, came up and he was holding 2 turtles. I said, those are beautiful. I knew what they were, but I hadn't seen one alive before. He had 2 terrapins. And this is the literally the 2 terrapins he had in August of 1983. And he brought these 2 terrapins. I said, well, Michael, where did you get these 2 terrapins? Did you catch them? Well, it turns out, no, he had gotten them out of somebody else's crab trap. He had found them trapped in, and I said, well, I didn't scold him, because I said, I'm so glad you did, because they would have drowned in that crab trap. So I'm glad you got them. Let's see if we can go the next day and let's see if we can catch some more. And so I took my first venture into the Kiawah estuary, the salt marshes, the Kiawah River. The next day, I took Michael and 2 of his sisters, and they were all very young. And we took a seine, that we could seine up, see if we could seine up the turtles. We literally swam the creek Kiawah River. It's not that wide. Swam across to a creek we called Terrapin Creek, because we had seen some turtle heads popping up. And we walked up that creek, pulling that seine, the 3 of them on one side and me on the other, walked up the creek. It was about, maybe 200 or 300 yards. And of course they liked it. He was excited about using a seine. And in 15 minutes, took us about 15 minutes to walk up, we caught 23 of these diamondback terrapins. Couldn't believe it. There they were in a boat. We put the seine in the boat full of fish and terrapins and stingrays and a flounder. I remember we caught a flounder. There they were. Thought, my gosh, we need to study these things. So this was 1983, and my son Mike made the first captures of these terrapins. And from the next 6 years, I decided to start bringing students and people from SREL and the University of Georgia down to this Kiawah. They were very accommodating, letting us stay there so we could do these surveys. And we just used big seines, two people on each end and pulling the seine. And you can see over to the left of the person wearing the hat. There's a bag sitting, so the terrapins get funneled into that bag. So does everything else that happens to be in the creek, but sharks and stingrays and crabs. But it collects the terrapins that way. And then we pull it up on shore. We seine it low tide, and we catch terrapins. So, and this would be a typical good seine haul. Lots of animals that in one seine haul you could get this. But remember, I caught 23 with just 3 little children. Another technique we use, that's one of our main techniques. Another technique we use is a TRAMMEL net. This is like, if you've ever heard of a gill net, but it's similar, and you can kind of envision, it's got floats on the top, a lead line at the bottom, so it stretches out, and it's like 2 volleyball nets with big gaps in it on either side of a tennis net. In other words, so a fish or a turtle, terrapin, swims through the big opening, hits the other one, and then gets pushed back and gets trapped. So you then go and take the terrapin out of the net. So that's how we've caught most of the animals in this technique. We've tried trapping, but there's so much to eat in a salt marsh that it's hard to lure a turtle into a trap. The first few years, we kind of did a little bit of, with the students from SREL mainly, and a few volunteers. It started to get easy to get volunteers to help us for a coastal study, as you might imagine. But one year we got as many as 200 in a year, and the other time 50 to 100, depending on how many times we went down and what the effort was. But 1989 was a memorable year in this study, and I put it as a milestone because not that personnel changed or anything, except Hurricane Hugo hit the coast of South Carolina. And as far as I can tell, it hit Kiawah Island on the Kiawah River was the main thing based on the impact we saw. It was, any of you that lived here and around certainly going to remember it. It pretty much shut down the state for some time and made major impacts on the economy and just living in Charleston area. And Tony, some of us went out within and checked to see what the damage was. This was after it had passed, but it was devastating. In fact, talking to Tony Tucker here, who was with me, and we pretty much just said, well, that's the end of the terrapin study. These terrapins couldn't possibly survive that. But turtles are pretty resilient, and they don't care about hurricanes. They just go down in the mud and wait it out. And so, fortunately, Tony and Jeff Lovich, and it was carried out by Tony for 4 years, developed a program, got a contract called Earthwatch, a grant from the Earthwatch organization. Earthwatch's a great group. What they did was have people as volunteers that would come help a scientific project. They would pay to come, and we would give them lodging and food, and we worked with the Kiawah Island company at that time to provide resources we needed to stay there. And these people would come for 2 weeks at a time. And Tony organized, taught them how to seine, how to use TRAMMEL nets, and and this went on for 4 years, people coming during the summertime. And Nancy FITZSIMMONS was Tony's partner that worked. They both live in Australia now, but she also did a lot with, and Jeff Lovich did a lot of the lab work associated with this organization. Anyway, these was a great group, and Tony's, if it hadn't been for Tony, this project would not have continued on. He just took over and organized these people, the inexperienced people, and that's why one reason we had so many participants in this program over the years. That went on for a while, and then let's see. And Tony, at 1989, we thought, okay, that's the end of the terrapins. And you can see that was nothing like the end of the terrapins, because there were more than ever. I think partly because of the effort of the research effort that was made, but also it didn't affect that. Storms don't affect turtles. Turtles have dealt with storms for millennia. And so they don't disappear because of a storm. Many of the people at the time were really joined in and helped with the project. Like Tony Mills, who many of you, I'm sure, are all familiar with, was Tony could go in the water and just sometimes catch a turtle by hand. It was amazing what he could do. And then we had someone that needs to be mentioned is Tim Zimmerman, who in 1992, when the Earthwatch project was going on, he was with the College of Charleston, got a master's degree, and he's the first person that determined when and where and how many eggs Diamondback terrapins lay. And we tracked where they laid their eggs on Kiawah, he did, and he got his master's degree and did a real service to the project at the time. Another person was Meg Hoyle, who runs the Botany Bay Eco Tours on Edisto today. She worked on the Kiawah project for her master's degree at the University of Georgia. And what Meg discovered, she documented for sure that crab traps kill turtles, kill terrapins, and that they cannot survive from the time of a low tide when the trap would be out of water. Remember, these terrapins breathe oxygen just like we do, and they can stay underwater for a while, but they cannot stay underwater for an entire high tide cycle if the trap is underwater. And commercial and recreational crab traps have killed, I don't know how many, but surely hundreds, certainly hundreds of terrapins at Kiawah and thousands along the coast of South Carolina. Anyway, her thesis was published and in a scientific journal, and definitely the evidence we needed, or the suspicions we had that this was a problem. Anyway, another person a postdoc at SREL was Rich Siegel, and Sarah Watson was a technician or student at the time. Anyway, he decided the terrapin problem was really this was a problem. These terrapins were declining, and we knew crab trapping was a problem, and there may be other issues associated with, say, development, like siltation, maybe even pesticides in the water. Anyway, he organized, and to his credit, actually published a paper I'll show you in a moment. But we had nearly every state where terrapins occur. Terrapins are found from Cape Cod all the way around the Peninsula, Florida, all the way to Corpus Christi, Texas. So they're in the salt marshes all the way around the country on the east. So we had 33 people representing 13 states, nearly every state, and every one of them reported declining populations of diamondback terrapins. Not a pretty sight. And Rich managed to get this published in an international journal about the ecology, status and management of diamondback terrapins, and what do we need to do about it. And there were lots of organizations developed and formed after that. Lots of projects started. But of course, nobody could ever catch up with SREL because we started ours before anybody else. So as long as we kept doing it, then we would have the longest study. So I had a series of graduate students, and they seemed to like to play in the water. So we caught lots of terrapins with them. But by then, the declines, you can see the levels were going down, even with similar efforts that we'd made before. There just weren't as many terrapins at Kiawah Island. And it turned out this was happening in other parts of the range too. So let me find my cursor here. Okay, the next thing, as I was, had students involved, Davidson College also got involved with students. There were a lot of undergraduates there. And there were, we began to have surveys where there's a mix, like half the people here are from SREL and half are from Davidson College. And a person that's really instrumental in the future of the project, and it's Kristen Sakala. She was a student at this time at Davidson. She went on to become a graduate student and got a PhD at the University of Georgia, and now is actually in charge of the Kiawah Island Terrapin project. She is a tremendous organizer, and we kept doing the studies, but you can see there just weren't as many terrapins as there had been. We would catch sometimes 100 or even 150 one year, but nothing like those numbers we got back in the 1980s and early 90s. So Kristen now is a professor at Savannah, University of the South, runs a project, comes down from there. And when we do the sampling in the spring and the fall, that's when we usually do it, sometimes in the summer. And she sets up Kiawah still is very supportive of giving us nice lab space on a picnic table. And they would actually let us come inside if we wanted to. We just like to do the measurement outside. But Kristen organizes it, and it is moving along, and we've sampled every year since 1983, not as extensively some years as others, but every single year we've sampled. Even during the COVID years, we went the 2 years we sampled just in small little groups that stayed pretty far apart and worked outside. But I want to go through here at the end some of the just the key points that have been made. One is that the population of terrapins on Kiawah Island has declined. No question about it. There are not as many terrapins now as there was when we started. The creek we call Terrapin Creek, where the kids and I caught 23 terrapins in one seine haul. We've gone, there've been most years we found no terrapins. And one year we found one terrapin, caught her, she was a female, marked that turtle, so we could know it when we captured her again. Caught her the next year and never saw another turtle in Terrapin, one turtle. And it used to be full of turtles. We've got three other creeks that we've got surveys information for years and years. And no, there are no terrapins there anymore. Now, two of the creeks, and they just happen to be kind of far away from most of the development. I can't say what, or it may be they're away from where a lot of the crab trapping is done. So I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say what is the cause of it, but they're definitely fewer. We have high numbers in some of the other creeks, but these are ones that are kind of far removed. A second, and we're of course continuing to study and using new techniques like telemetry, sonography, or sonar technology rather, drones, looking at trying to assess what's there. But there's no question about it, crab traps kill terrapins. And we've tried to get regulations that make it so you have turtle excluder devices where the terrapins where the crabs can get in, but the terrapins can't. And all you have to do is turn the things, crabs will go in sideways. A turtle won't do that. So you could keep the terrapins out and let the crabs in, but it's hard to get. You don't want to. It would be nice if you could pass a rule that the people would do that, but it's not been totally successful. So you think about that yourselves. Should you try to get people in an area to do that? We were able to do it for a while on Kiawah with the residents. There was a lot of recreational crab traps anyway. Another thing, siltation. I don't know if it's hard to measure the impact of siltation, but when you build a golf course, like on Seabrook Island next door, there's runoff. In the creek, that Terrapin Creek that my kids and I walked up, it took us 15 minutes to get from one place to where we pull the seine out, one seine haul. And these are little kids. Today, it takes in great shape graduate students 20 minutes to walk through the mud that's in that creek. There was no mud. It was sand and crushed oyster shells, and we just walked up it. And you can do that today. There are people that just wouldn't be able to do it. I'm not sure a kid could even make it up that creek anymore. That creek has changed measurably, and it wasn't because of Hurricane Hugo, because it stayed the same for a little while after that. But so that siltation is probably a problem in a lot of coastal areas. Two other areas I'm going to combine these two: site fidelity, which means we check where do we find the turtles, and the longevity of these things. Both are very important because for animals that live a long time, the usual rule is that to live a long time, it takes you a long time to reach maturity. And these terrapins females take 8 years before they become mature. 6 to 8 years, usually about 8 years, 8 to 10 years. So if it takes that long, that means they got to survive that long just to lay eggs the first time. Think about that. You've got to live a long time to replace yourself, replenish the population, and replace yourself. The site fidelity is important because these turtles don't move. We've caught, as I said earlier, thousands of turtles, hundreds. We've marked hundreds and recaptured, marked them so for individual identification, recaptured them for years and years, hundreds of them, a small number, a couple of thousand, 3,000. Most of them are always in the same location. They were within just a few hundred feet. There's huge river and marsh complex. The same turtles terrapins stay in the same place year after year. Now, so you get that two combination. So they live a long time. So they have to stay alive to reproduce, and they stay in the same place. If you eliminate them, if say a crab trap becomes a ghost trap and it's pulling in terrapins, and we have found one person, Andrew Gross, I believe, found a crab trap not on Kiawah, but could have been on Kiawah, that had, I believe it was 98 terrapin shells in it, dead, that had been died over the years and years. It just kept coming in. So every time you find a ghost crab trap, it's going to be a death chamber for terrapins. So anyway, so they stay in the same place, they live a long time, and I could show you data, but I would rather show you an example that fits what I'm talking about. This is a turtle, and it's one that was marked. It's a male, and males are smaller than females, and they're much smaller than the females, which get twice as big. But you can see in the back there's a little notch. That's the way we mark them, and that's a permanent mark. It doesn't hurt the turtle. It's like clipping a end of a fingernail, and it's permanent, and we can measure that turtle, how much it's grown, where it's moved, and things. But this particular one was one caught in June of 1991, and last caught just pre-COVID, our last pre-COVID sample in September of 2019. It's 20-something, 9 years or 20 something like that, 28 years. We captured this turtle over the time, 23 different times, 17 different years. It was in the same creek. There's half a dozen or a dozen creeks a terrapin could choose. Same place every year at Kiawah Island. And what was interesting, we knew this from our data, but this just shows it. That turtle was full grown as an adult male when we first caught it in 1991, which means it was at least 8 years old, 10 years old, at least at that time. So add 20 something more years onto it. And they live a long time. Another example of one was, I think this was our record so far. It's one that was caught in 1986 and caught again 30 years later. And if it was 10 years old, and it was an adult when first caught, male again. Again, it's 40 years. It's an old turtle. So anyway, just to mention there've been a lot, as you can say, a lot of people, a lot of different experiences, with different experiences involved in the Kiawah studies. And again, I can't name everybody, but there's some people that have just been instrumental in working in the program with the project. Chris with the Turtle Survival Alliance is, there's a good example. I didn't just realize it. He's got a male turtle in his left one hand, and the bigger turtle is a female. That's a typical difference in their size. Mike Freeze and Chris sampling. Tom Luring, I mentioned him because he comes all the way from Wichita State University to when we're sampling, and he's I don't know, he just works real hard, catches a lot of terrapins, and shows others how to do it. Thomas Rainwater, that you probably a lot of you know, is always helps, and it's been very helpful with very many aspects. Kind of want to end with this little story. Our last pre-COVID sample, now we're sampling again. So, and we sampled it in those COVID years, but only a time or two. We're back now to sampling. But Parker, who is caught, he went out with his, what do you call it? He went out and caught the last two terrapins. As everybody was coming in, he used a cast net and caught the last two turtles in 2019. And what's interesting, his dad caught the first two terrapins in this study, and Parker at 2019 had caught the last two, and there were 3,000 in between. But and here's what's really interesting. We didn't mark those first turtles the kids caught. For all we know, one of those turtles that Michael caught in 1983 could be one of these that Parker caught in 30 something years later, because they live that long. And if you're going to live that long, you need some protection. So this is you shouldn't use the word unique very often, because it only means one of a kind. But Diamondback terrapins are unique among turtles, even 370 something species of turtles, and they're unique. Why? Because they're the only turtle in the world. Of all the turtles, it's the only turtle that lives only in brackish waters, from Cape Cod to Corpus Christi. They will venture into the ocean, but they always come back. They'll venture into fresh water, but they always come back. But they live in the estuarine brackish water systems. So they're really special. And where you live, you've got them. You may not see them unless you get out into the waters, but they're there, and they're going to need all the protection they can get in different ways. So this picture, the final one, these are four children who are the children of Michael, Susan, and Jennifer, who were my three children, who made that first sample on Kiawah Island. And this is about the size of the three of them that at that time. And one thing for sure is how do we make sure that these children could also go out and their children could go out and find these Diamondback terrapins, which are one of the most fantastic turtles in the world. Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whit. I do have a question from somebody. They were curious what regulations are maybe around terrapins, are placed around terrapins, and maybe what can be done to, I guess, make them more strict, is the question.
Yeah, different states have different they're not federally protected, but different states have different laws and different restrictions. In South Carolina, the rule is, the way I understand it is, it's the way I understand, no, it's the rule, is you can have two terrapins in your possession at any one time. In other words, this prevents one of the threats to terrapins some places, and it could be here, but I don't think so anymore, is there used to be a real delicacy in the restaurant trade And there were, in fact, and this was many years ago, nearly a century ago, they were almost wiped out because there were thousands collected for restaurants, and you could go in and, I mean, these collectors would go in and catch them. But so now in South Carolina, it would be illegal. Of course, that doesn't mean somebody can't do it illegally, but legally you couldn't take a boatload, a truckload full of Diamondback terrapins. If you did catch them at one time, you can't take them out of the state. You can't take them at all. In fact, can't have them in your possession more than 2 at a time. Now, we have permits to work for them because we always hope we're going to have more than 2 at a time. But anyway, that's one of the regulations. I'm not sure what some of the other, I know Maryland and New Jersey have pretty strict regulations, Massachusetts too, but I'm not sure exactly what they are. If somebody knows, they can say so.
Yeah, and I do want to just clarify for that person who asked, they had like kind of compared the regulations for sea turtles. And those are considered threatened or endangered species. And I think they look at that as a population as a whole, while like the terrapin may be declining, but the population across the United States is still fairly large, I would say, or large enough that it wouldn't be considered a threatened or endangered species. Does anybody else? Oh.
Go ahead.
Just a few people mentioning that they have found terrapins around Capers and Pritchard's Island in Beaufort County. We as well have found terrapins nesting in our gardens almost every year at the center. Does anybody else have any questions for Whit in regards to Diamondback terrapins or the study itself? I have a question. Is there a way for people to be involved with the study, to come out and help out with the capturing or anything like that?
Yes, people contact some of the people like Kristen Sakala, or there's several people that could make arrangements for somebody to come out and join. They just have to get in touch with somebody. There's a Kiawah Island Terrapin website, and I don't know, Chris, maybe I don't know if you can pull up the URL, but it's Kiawah Terrapin. If you look up Kiawah Terrapins, you'll find the website, and on that is a contact sheet or jot form of some sort. You could get in touch with somebody and say that. I mean, we have no shortage of volunteers, but we'd always like to have people get involved. But I think that would probably be the most effective way, unless you know somebody directly who is part of the project. That would be the best way to go, is through that website.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I threw I put that website link onto the chat. I also want to tell everybody that I put some of those articles that have been published by Whit onto the chat, as well as a website for his books and publications if anybody is interested in purchasing those. So SEDNR is working with UGA Genetics Lab to ID terrapins. Do you know anything about that? Somebody just posted that comment.
A question to me?
What? Yes, sir. Do you know anything about the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources working with UGA Genetics Lab to ID terrapins?
I think that maybe Andrew Gross, a state herpetologist, he was at UGA and he's here now, but I'm not and I know we did, John Avis was a professor there, and Trip Lamb, professor, a student that worked on this project. I've done genetic sample. I don't know exactly. I don't know someone right this minute that's working on it, but I know several people in the past. Is there a name of somebody up there that, and it may be Kristen, Dr. Sakala. She's from Georgia as well as now at Savannah, so she may have,
it's Brian Shamblin.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, he was. That's right. I did talk to him. I mean, I thought he was working with sea turtles, but I think terrapins too. Yeah. So, and I don't know if it's with the Kiawah terrapins or not, but the way a lot of samples can be taken now with these animals, so that just take a little snipping of the tail or back foot or something like that, and just a little piece of skin to get DNA. And that's all. You don't have to kill the animal anymore.
Right.
To take a genetic sample. So, and yeah, that's right. He's probably doing some work, and probably with the Kiawah stuff. Yeah.
So I will just say that Kenny Mills made a comment saying that he really enjoyed your talk. I thought you would like to hear that. But I do have a question for you in regards to the sampling and like the techniques that you guys are using. Are you guys doing water quality data as well while you're sampling?
No.
No. Okay.
Not each time we sample for the terrapins. I'm sure other people have done water quality samples and sediment samples of different sorts, but we don't take that. I mean, it's our main concern when we're sampling is when's high tide going to be and low tide, because the amplitude is 6 feet at Kiawah. So
Sure.
You're at the wrong time, you can't catch any terrapins. But no, I'm sure some people do, and they probably do at the College of Charleston at the Marine Lab there, and other places that take water quality, but we don't really, but we could certainly get it if necessary.
Well, I was just curious and wondering if the changes from the surrounding habitat have changed the water quality, and potentially maybe that's a leading factor to population decline.
It could be. I know the water quality is such that it's based on other information I've gotten. I know when I first came to Kiawah in the 1970s, I first worked there in 1974. When we first came there, and then on into the 80s when we started this, we would eat oysters right out of the river, just right there on the, or I wouldn't eat an oyster right out of the Kiawah River now, I don't think.
I don't think so.
But we did. I mean, it was because it was clear. You just have a feeling that maybe there's more in the water now than there used to be.
Sure. I have a question. This Carolyn lives on a large creek in Beaufort area. Frequently crab trappers leaving traps around the ends and distant sides of their dock. How can an average citizen make a difference?
Well, on protecting terrapins, is that?
Yeah, I think so.
I think one of the things is you talk to people. Now you can't. I know I've talked to individuals. I know other people that have about recreational crab traps. Or one thing don't leave your traps in so long that a terrapin can drown, and that would be a couple of hours. They're going to drown. So you need to, if they can't if a terrapin can't get up to breathe, it's going to drown, or could in 3 hours, certainly. Explain that to people. And that's why a lot of times we have a lot of people go to give talks to coastal groups and explain. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, they don't want to kill a terrapin, but they don't know that they could kill a terrapin. So it's sort of education, public education by the public, that's one of the things. There's always that issue of legislation, which I think is always the worst thing we have to do. And it's because I hate to get to that point. It would be better if people would just be educated. And once they're educated, and that's true for most people, they will do things to help. And the probably the simplest one thing is that stopping terrapins from getting killed in crab traps. And also there's one area, a community effort that was done in, let's see, I think it was Texas or Louisiana, where they went and removed ghost traps along the coast, and they had entire barges filled up with abandoned and usually recreational, sometimes commercial. I mean, commercial trappers don't want to lose their trap, so they're going to be. But if you come down from, Connecticut and spend the weekend on Kiawah Island, you finally go by a crab trap, and then your kids put it out, and then they forget about it, and it's there to kill terrapins forever. So setting up community efforts to let's get rid of the ghost traps along, and they're everywhere along the coast. But I think just telling other people, making them aware, and there are plenty of articles written and about what the threats are to terrapins and a lot of other coastal wildlife. So I think communication is with others is the one thing all of us can do. Any of us can do.
So I have a fun question, and I want to answer this one a little bit. Somebody asked, do the turtles bite? And I tell all the kids that come to the Maritime Center that if an animal has a mouth, it can bite. But I'm curious if you have any fun stories about being bitten by terrapins.
Yeah, I mean, they're fun if it's biting somebody else, but well, the worst one I ever saw was collecting turtles on a river, and the person with me, named Bob Webb, leaned over to catch a turtle, snapping turtle, to bring it out of the water. And when he did, it reached up and bit him on the throat. And it took a pair of pliers and a screwdriver to get while he was kicking and screaming. But that's kind of a fun story.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sure he tells it a different way. But yes, we've all been. You mentioned Tony Mills. I know Tony's and I both have been bitten more times than we like, but and it's always an accident. But terrapins aren't very bad. They do bite, but not as bad as like snapping turtles or slider turtles, or they don't like us to associate with us very much. Terrapins do.
So somebody had a question about how do middle school students who are interested in studying the environment go about doing it? If you want to answer that, I'd be more than happy to, but you want to give it a go?
If you're interested in just the environment?
I guess they want to get their middle school kids, their class, interested in doing environmental studies.
Well, and I'm not sure whether this means in the context of at school or a family getting there. I mean, there are lots of, well, one thing I would find out about local regional nature centers or groups. I know Jake Zadig and Tony Mills and many other people have programs. Savannah River Ecology Lab has programs of educating the public about various aspects of the environment. And so, and of course, the last 2 years, like for everybody, with the COVID situation, it's been the hands-on kind of programs have been limited, but I think they're kind of coming back. And I would check local nature centers. That would be the first step. And then read as much as you can find out about organizations and on the web. And you've got to be careful on the internet, of course, what kind of real information you're getting, but at least you can find out about publications or books, and about organizations and then checking those, like in South Carolina, there's organizations called South Carolina Partners in Amphibians and Reptile Conservation. Anybody can join, it's free, and they have field trips, and so it's called SC Park, and I think you just go on the website and find out. And a lot of these organizations, like the South Carolina Association of Naturalists, they have field trips that people can sign up and go on that can be very, very instructive. So I think that's the thing. You find out the organizations and places and people that do public education, and there's a lot of them. And I know the first step is to find out who they are, but I think you can do that pretty well now with the internet searches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're even a resource in Beaufort County. We do tons of field trip activities. Obviously, our webinars are part of our programming as well. I also, SC Park is a great organization. I've been on a couple field trips with them. A lot of awesome experiences that can be done around the state in the Low Country, especially. Well, I think if anybody has any other questions, you are welcome to shoot those to me. And I can always forward them to Whit if there's anything else. But Whit, thank you so much for participating.
Well, thank you, Chris, for organizing this, and do that. If you have people send questions to you, and then you and I can communicate about them, and I'd be glad to help you answer them. So let's see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I hope I've answered what I can about them. All right.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for participating. Hope to see you guys on the next talk. Again, that's in 2 weeks. Look forward to having Anna Klompin be part of that. But thanks again, Whit. You have a wonderful day, and I hope everyone else does too.
Goodbye.